Thank you for talking to Kaz.
Oh man, that hurt. I'm so sorry. I felt so terrible.
He was talking to me. I said, the person you're talking to.
Yeah, he came to see me, but I had 5 minutes before a class was starting, but I felt
Play basketball.
I felt terrible at what he went through. I kept telling him, it's not us. It's not you know how much you're loved here, and how important you and your family are, and your mom is,
And that's the first time he's ever had it.
Oh God, it was just horrible. I heard this, yeah. Just terrible. Just terrible. Oh, please. Good morning. That was nice last night, yeah?
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Just lovely.
I thought it was sweet, really sweet. Good morning, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Let's let our friends come on in. How's everybody today? Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, welcome. Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to need a chumash today, so come get a chumash. We're going to read carefully section of chumash. Morning. Hi. They're right there behind you. Right there. Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah. We have the microphone, but we don't have Doug today. Doug's out of town, so let's take the mic. And you want to do it? All right, you'll be our Vanna White. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good morning. Okay. Good morning. Pop, you okay? You doing all right? All right, good morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. It's really nice to see everyone, and to everyone who's watching on TV at home in your pajamas. It's great to have you too. A few announcements of things going on following our Torah study. Of course, you're welcome to come in. The library minyan's meeting upstairs. The kids' minyan will meet in here. There's a wonderful bar mitzvah in the sanctuary. A lovely kid, Benjamin, is having his bar mitzvah, so come and join us. Following that, of course, there's lunch. It was enchiladas yesterday. I don't know what it'll be today, but usually it's the same food. And then there's a Parsha study after that in the youth lounge, so everyone's invited to stay. It is chilly, isn't it? Yeah, let me fix that. We'll do this coming week, I've got this coming on. Here we go. I see. It's on cool. That probably isn't a good idea.
Yeah, we don't want it 61.
No,
we want it like 60.
I got it. I've done this twice. All right. Now it's going to get hot in here. Okay. Following this coming week on Wednesday night, the College of Jewish Studies continues. We're doing the debates that have shaped Jewish life. Last week, a very interesting debate between the Hasidim and the Misnagdim, the birth of Hasidism and its opposition. This week, we're going to take up the rise of Zionism. Our guest will be Rabbi Chaim Seidler-Feller, who's the former director of UCLA Hillel, great scholar. And Chaim's going to teach us the debate between Theodor Herzl and Achad Ha'am on their visions of the new Jewish state. Okay, following that, the following week, on Wednesday, Rabbi Farkas and I will do two visions of American Judaism, Abraham Joshua Heschel and Mordechai Kaplan. They had offices across the hall from each other at the Jewish Theological Seminary, were very kind and cordial to each other in person and vicious to each other in writing.
You said they wouldn't get in an elevator.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that. It was deeper. It was actually more egregious than that. You remember, when Kaplan published his prayer book, he was excommunicated by the Orthodox rabbinate. And there were rabbis at the Jewish Theological Seminary who observed that cherem, that excommunication, and wouldn't be in the elevator with him. At faculty meetings, nobody sat next to him. This was very serious. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Kaplan's vision, Judaism, and Heschel's. And then the last week in February, we'll conclude our series with a summary session and talk about what the debates teach us. And we'll finish with one of the great debates of Jewish life is Humintosh versus Latkes. And my father is telling me that I have to take the Humintosh position out of loyalty to my family patrimony. So
You got a $5,000 reward.
I went to college on a Baker's Union scholarship. So how would it look, So that'll be our College of Jewish Studies this coming year. A couple of other just announcements of things coming up. Not this next week, but the week after, we're going to have a guest on Shabbat, a friend of mine who I met in one of the conferences I attended some years ago. Nechama Goldman Barash is a teacher at the Pardes Institute in Jerusalem, and she is a very unique personality, one of the very rare women who have been admitted into the realm of halachic deciders and teachers in Israel. She's an Orthodox woman, a teacher of Talmud and Jewish law, and she is considered one of the authorities of Jewish law in Israel. So we'll be talking to Nechama about the things she works on. She works primarily in issues of marriage and divorce and how that goes on in Israel, but more about what it's like to be a feminist voice in the Orthodox circles of Israeli Judaism. She'll be here, Torah study. It's on the 22nd. She'll be and then after, she'll do Torah study with us, and afterwards she'll stay and we'll do a conversation with her after lunch. So please hang around for that. We'll do that as well. She's a very special soul. And some other wonderful March 5th, my book came out, so my biography of Rabbi Schulweis. Thank you. So on March 5th, which is Thursday night, March 5th, we're going to have a celebration of the book, and our guest that night will be Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, who is the dean of the rabbinical school at the AJU. And usually I interview Brad. This time he's going to interview me. So we'll have a conversation about Rabbi Schulweis, his legacy, and what we wrote in the book. Come on in, got plenty of room. Come on in. The book is available for sale now. Yeah, now and then, yes. And if we actually are going to sell it a little cheaper than you can get it elsewhere, So we get a little bit of a discount here. And I will sign it for you for a small fee. You give $1 million to the building fund, you get a free copy, So I'll be happy to sign it for anybody. We have some now. We got the first shipment, and there's a big shipment coming in. So please, it's called "In Pursuit of Godliness: The Life and Thought of Rabbi Harold Schulweis." For those of you who were here, like you, Howard, you were here. For those of you who were here during those years, the first half of the book is the historical setting, and you'll recognize a lot of the things that we talk about. The second half is an analysis of his philosophy, his theology, his activism, and his philosophy of Jewish community life. And you're all in the book, so you, if not by name, you're in there by spirit. Sorry, what?
Are my kids'
No. But if they could be for $1 million gift to the building fund. Listen, I'm a rabbi. I can be bought. I mean, it's not so hard. I'm trying to save the Jewish people, and right now, okay. Any other? That's what's going on in the shul. Keep an eye out for the Purim's coming too, which is really very sweet. So that's in a month. So we're going. Oh my gosh, it's Rabbi Schuldenfrei, the other Rabbi Schuldenfrei. Come on in, Brian. Come in over here. Come sit down. Nice to see you. Yom Chofesh, and you come to shul? Oh, sabbatical? Oh, where's Jeff Goss? Sabbatical. Rabbi on sabbatical. Yeah, right. S-A-B-B. Unbelievable. All right, if you have a Chumash, we're on page 399. Parsha Beshalach. It's the fourth Torah portion in the book of Exodus. It is the climax of the Exodus story. It is a story you all know. And the Bible knows that you know the story. That's why it's written the way it's written. Because it's going to surprise you. It's going to play off of your expectation and surprise you. So here's what we're going to do this morning. We have time, I think. We're going to read it 3 times. Because there's really many ways to read it, but at least 3. The first time we're going to read it through, we're going to read it like a story. Because it's a great story. And we're going to read it like you'd read a story, following the characters of the story. What did the characters in the story see and experience? That's the first way we're going to read it. Then the second time we're going to read it, we're going to go back and we're going to pay attention not to the characters, but to the storyteller. What is the storyteller trying to tell us? How did the storyteller construct this narrative in such a way as to deliver a message? Then, the third time we read it, we're going to read it like the redactor, the editor. Because somebody took this story, which was a fully blown story, and put it into a context in the Bible. And the context that it finds itself in the Bible changes the whole story. So first that's the participants, then the storyteller, then the redactor, then we'll get lunch. Ready? So where did we just come from? At the end of chapter 12, this is chapter 13 and 14. At the end of chapter 12, we left Egypt. Remember? The 10th plague comes. Pharaoh summons Moses in the night and says, get out of my land. Go. Do whatever you want. Just leave. And then at the end, Pharaoh says, and bless me too. We have defeated Pharaoh. Pharaoh is humiliated. Egypt is destroyed, just destroyed. The hail destroys the building. The locust destroys the crops. The darkness destroys any social solidarity. And the death of the firstborn hammers home that there is a power at work here beyond Egypt's control. They just say, go, just go. The neighbors say, go before you kill us all. Just go. So in the night we left, we ran. And the idea that we didn't have time to let the bread rise. We just grabbed what we could and we ran. I told you, I had a friend of mine who had a Seder in New York when I was a graduate student. And he said, wear traveling clothes and bring a suitcase. And put in the suitcase what you would take with you out of Egypt. And this was a beautiful thing. First of all, when we got to the Seder, I didn't know this, but we sat on our suitcases. There were no chairs around the table. And during the course of the Seder, he invited each one of us to open the suitcase and show us what would you take from Egypt. If you were running and you didn't have time to pack and you could just grab something from the shelf or the drawer, what would you take with you? And the things that people brought were beautiful things, remembrances of family, stories, objects, just remarkable stuff. We ran. And the story is we just started running. And we kept running. And we ran until we reached the banks of the Red Sea. So if you'll please turn to page 401. They set out from Sukkot. They encamped at Eitan at the edge of the wilderness. God is in front of them. Right? And then chapter 14, verse 5. Here begins the drama. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled. Now, he ordered that the night before. But when he gets up in the morning, you wake up in the morning and you wake up in the morning saying, what just happened? When he realized what he had just done, Pharaoh, because what did he just do? Not only did he release all the Israelites, not only did he release his labor force, but what else did he do? He acknowledged that there's somebody more powerful than me. There's somebody more powerful than me. He accepted the humiliation. And a leader like Pharaoh can't live with that. First of all, because it completely undermines his authority. And it completely undermines his sense of himself. And after all, who are these but slaves? Now, in the movie, which of course is the authorized version, Yul Brynner is like stalking around swearing about Moses, and Anne Bancroft, his Nefertiti, Baxter, not Anne Bancroft, that's a different story. Anne Baxter, his wife says, "You let them go?" Remember, because she had the hots for Moses, remember? And he rejected her. So she wants him dead too, right? And she goads him. See, Cecil B. DeMille has to think of a way to talk about Pharaoh's heart being hardened. So he uses this slinky woman to do it. "You let them go? You weakling, you." So in order to protect his male accoutrement, to reclaim that part of his anatomy, Pharaoh was told, Pharaoh and his courtiers had the change of heart and said, "What is this we've done, releasing Israel from our service?" He ordered his chariot, took his men. He took 600 of his chariot. That's a lot of chariots. And the rest of the chariots. And the Lord stiffened his heart and gave chase. And the Israelites departed defiantly. And the Egyptians gave chase. Now, there's a duplication in the language, because what we have here is an overlap of narratives. There's 2 or 3 different versions of the story that had been edited, spliced together. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites caught sight of the Egyptians advancing upon them. So where are we? Israelites, where are we? We thought we were free because we got out. We're 3 days out of Egypt, right? No one's chasing us. We thought we were free. And suddenly we hear and see the chariots coming down the hill. What's ahead of us? The sea. What's behind us? Pharaoh's chariots. Where are we? Stuck. Stuck in the middle. Stuck in the middle. Now, when Jews are in danger of immediate moral threat, what do? We kvetch. And the thing is, the more imminent the mortal danger, the more articulate we become. We are capable of gorgeous soliloquies when we are kvetching. You know, not so much when we're saying thank you, not so much with gratitude, not so much, but when we kvetch, oh my God. Right? The Israelites cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, listen to this, "Was it for want of graves in Egypt that you brought us to die in the wilderness?" Whoa! What? There weren't enough cemeteries? There weren't enough graves? Like, what have you done to us, taking us out of Egypt? What have you done to us, taking us out? Like, we wanted to be in Egypt. You forced us to leave. Isn't this the very thing we said? I told you so. I told you we should have stayed as slaves, right? I mean, just imagine every family fighting among themselves. Like, I told you we shouldn't have left, you know. I told you so. Didn't we say to you, let us be, and we will serve the Egyptians, for it's better to serve the Egyptians than die in the wilderness. Boy, you people get so articulate when you're complaining to your leaders. You want to know why no one wants to be a Jewish leader today? But Moses said to his people, now this is unusual, because usually when Moses is confronted, what does he do? He has one of 2 possibilities. Either he melts and falls on his face, which he's inarticulate. He becomes completely flustered. Or else he becomes violent, right? When he's confronted, he's not. This is the one thing in the world Moshe Rabbeinu ain't good at. Everyone has something they're not good at. This is what he's not good at. But here, for some reason, he manages. So Moses said to the people, "Have no fear. Stand by and witness the deliverance which the Lord will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will battle for you. Shut up." Well, it says hold your peace, but he means shut up. Tachrishun means shut up. You can put any other appellative in the middle of that phrase. And then, look at the next line. The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry out to me?" So what did Moses do that's not listed here? After he makes this brave speech about God will fight to you, he turns around to God and says, "What did I do?" And God says, "What are you crying out to me? Mati tzakalai, don't cry to me. Move." There's a time to cry, a time to pray, and a time to move, says the Midrash, right? So, Vayisu, move, go. You know, but there is a sea in front of you. Tell the Israelites, hold your rod over the sea, so the Israelites may march on the sea and dry ground, and I'll stiffen the hearts. Also, God gets articulate. I mean, death is coming down upon them, and God says, I'll explain everything to you. I'll stiffen the hearts of the Egyptians. They'll go in after them. I'll gain glory through Pharaoh and his warriors, his chariots and his horsemen. Let the Egyptians know that I am the Lord. All of this has one purpose. What's the purpose? This is one grand historical drama to say once and for all, I'm running history now. Right? When God gained glory through Pharaoh's chariots. Now, there's two versions of the story. The one you know from the movie is version B. There's version A, which is a lot less dramatic, which is why DeMille didn't include it in the movie, right? So here's, right, the angel of God had been ahead of them. The angel took place behind them, right? There's this pillar of, I mean, if you're Pharaoh driving down the mountain in your chariot and you see a pillar of fire in front of you, would that inhibit you in any way? Right? Not Pharaoh, right? Okay? So Moses held his arm over the sea, and the Lord drove back the sea with a strong east wind all that night. That's version A. So how did God do it? Version A. Big wind. What does that mean, a big wind? A wind blows and the tide goes out. The tide went out. Right? You're dealing with a marshland, right? And the marshland is deep in water. But at a certain moment, the tide goes out, and what happens to a marshland? It's mushy, but you can walk across it if you know how to do it. What can't you do in a marshland? Drive a chariot through it. Anyone ever gotten stuck in the mud in your car? It's no fun, right? You got to call the AAA, right? Or triple Aleph in this case, right? And if you if you're an escaped slave and you're trying to get past chariots, the best place to do is cross a marshland. First of all, they can't track you because it's wet, and they can't follow you. So version A is a naturalist version. The wind blows, the tide goes out all night. They didn't leave all night, right? And turned the sea into dry ground, right? The water. Now, the other version, here's version B, which is the one you know, which is he holds his arm over the sea, and what happens? Right? Charlton Heston's version. The waters were split. The Israelites went into the sea on dry ground. The waters forming a wall for them on the right and the left. And so on this side, what do you see? This giant wall of water. And on this side, what do you see? This giant wall of water, and there's a midrash that you could look through and see fish. That was good. Somebody do that again. That was wonderful. Ooh. There's actually a fun midrash, because when he builds the Mishkan, I'll give you a preview coming attractions, there's a thing called chashim, which is translated in the Bible as dolphin skins, which is probably a kind of leather. But the midrash has fun with this. The rabbi said, where did they get dolphin skins? Well, they looked and they saw fish, so they pulled them out. And they carried dolphins with them into the desert. Wouldn't you? Flipper. They pulled Flipper out of the ocean, you know. Remember Flipper? Yeah. Or SeaWorld, right? The Egyptians came in after them, and all of Pharaoh's chariots and horsemen. At the morning watch, the Lord looked down upon the Egyptian army from the pillar of granite. He threw the Egyptians in a panic, and he locked the wheels of their chariot. That's version A. Because if you drive the chariots through the marsh, what's going to happen? They're going to get stuck. They got stuck. That's what happened. And then slowly the tide will come back in, and they'll have to abandon the chase. Right? And the Egyptians said, let's flee from the Israelites, for the Lord is fighting for them. It's the people always telling Pharaoh that he's in trouble, right? And the Lord said, hold your arm over the sea. We're back to version B again. This is the Charlton Heston version, right? That the waters may come down upon the Egyptians. And Moses held his arm. And at daybreak, the sea returned to its normal state. And the Egyptian fled. That's version A. But the Lord hurled the Egyptians into the sea. That's version B. And the waters turned back and covered the chariots. Pharaoh's entire army that followed him in the sea, not one of them remained. So what's the image on the other side of the sea? When we get to the other side of the sea, if you're following version B, which is the Charlton Heston version, the hail has destroyed all the buildings. The locust destroyed all the greenery of Egypt. The darkness destroyed social solidarity. There was chaos, social chaos in Egypt, right? And now God has just destroyed what? Pharaoh and all of his military power. So what's left? Nothing. What's left is desert. I mean, this idea that you turn back and the desert has covered Egypt. There's nothing left. That's the image. But Israelites marched through the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on the left and the right. That's version B again. You see the two versions? Everybody see that? Okay? And now you have to have a moral of the story, right? It's too good a story. It sounds like a cantata, like a drama, right? Because now the narrator chips in and says, thus. Don't you love the word thus? What does the word thus mean? I'm stopping the narrative flow, and I'm going to summarize what just happened. The Lord delivered Israel that day from the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea. And when Israel saw the wondrous power which the Lord had wielded against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord, and they had faith in the Lord and his servant Moses. Vayaminu b'Adonai uba Moshe avdo. End of drama. Everybody breathe. Great storytelling, right? But you think you're going to be free? Your parents were slaves. Your grandparents were slaves. Their parents were slaves. Their parents were slaves. You had no hope except to be a slave, and your children might have it a little easier than you. Suddenly this man, Moses, shows up and says, pack your things, we're leaving. You say, we don't believe it. Moses says, watch. 10 plagues descend upon Egypt. Egypt is ripped apart. Moses says, we're leaving tonight. Some of us stayed because we said, I can't believe this. Some of us left. And we leave and we run into the desert 3 days and we camp by the side of the Red Sea and we wonder, is it going to happen? Are we going to die here in the wilderness? One more act of miraculous salvation. One more act of miraculous redemption. We cross through on dry land through the sea and Pharaoh is drowned. And we get to the other side. Now, everybody, come with me. Come with me. I know your feet are muddy. I know it's been a long schlep. I know you're schlepping a lot of stuff, and it's been an emotional day. But now you got to the other side. Everybody breathe. No one is chasing us. No one is chasing. We are, for the first time in 270 years, free people. Free people, right? My Uncle Henry was liberated from the Auschwitz. Well, he wasn't liberated from Auschwitz. He was marched from Auschwitz into Germany. 3,500 men left on the march. Only 700 arrived in one of the out camps of Buchenwald. And he was locked in this camp. And on the last night, they nailed shut the barracks, and the men of his barracks sat there waiting for the machine guns to kill them all because they thought the Germans wanted to leave nobody there. And they waited all night, and they heard all this clanging and banging and shooting and bombing, and they didn't know what was going on because there were no windows in the barracks. And as the sun came up in the morning, they heard heavy boots walking up the ramp to their barracks, and they thought, this is it, they're going to kill us all. So they'll leave no one behind to tell the story. And somebody's boot smashed down the front door of the barracks, and the men of the barracks threw themselves on the ground and began to say Shema Yisrael because they thought this was their last moment of life. And there was this giant, tall man at the door who talked to them in Yiddish with an Oklahoma accent and said, Chevra, you're free. And he'd been a slave of the Nazis since the beginning of the war because his village was right on the border of Poland. He'd been a slave of the Nazis since 1939. This is now April 1945. And he was free. And he weighed 110 pounds. He was a 5'11", weighed 110 pounds. He was free. What's it like to be free after being a slave, after having no hope? That's the moment. So what do you do at that moment? You sing. So turn the page. Az Yashir Moshe V'nei Yisrael. And here's the song. Actually, this is Moses' song. This is the second song. If you go a little farther in the Torah, if you go to page 412, please, which is chapter 15, verse 19, this is the original song. The horses of Pharaoh with his chariot went into the sea. The Lord turned back on them the waters. The Israelites marched on dry ground. Then Miriam. Who is Miriam? It's Moshe's sister. The prophetess, Aaron's sister, took the timbrel, and it's the women who went out and danced. And they're the ones who wrote the song. Moshe stole the song from her sister. Right? Shiru ladonai ki ga'o ga'as sus v'rachbo rama bayam. That's the song. It's a song. There's nothing else to do at that moment but to sing. That's the story. That great storytelling. That's the great story. That's level number one. That's the story. Any questions? It's just a great story, right? Yeah.
There's a TV program where it said it wasn't the Yellow Sea, it was the Sea of Reeds.
Yeah, Yam Suf.
Yeah, it's the Sea of Reeds.
Yeah, not Red Sea. Yam Suf. Yam Suf means the sea means reeds. It was a marsh. It was a swamp. See, the A reading, which is the naturalist reading, says they went through a swamp. He waited for the tide to go out. He snuck them across the swamp. And when Pharaoh's police went chasing them, they couldn't get the chariots through the swamp, so they gave it up. It's a simpler reading, but it's not nearly as much fun. The B reading wants this to be... No, let me put this the other way around. The B reading captures the sense of, oh my God, wonder. That a slave would have, having made it to the other side of the swamp, and realize that I'm now free. Right? There's a good movie, by the way, it just came out. We watched it the other night on Netflix, called Harriet. It's about Harriet Tubman. You see this movie? It's on TV. You can go find it. It's really worth... This is about a woman, an African-American woman who sneaks out of the South and makes it to Philadelphia. And the sense of incredible, miraculous, unlikely relief at reaching freedom and being told, you're a person, not a slave. You're a person, not a slave. That's what the Torah is trying to capture with this miracle story. But there's another layer to it, which we'll get to in just a minute. Yes, please. Grab the mic so that the people at home can enjoy the question.
Thank you. But the Torah says it wasn't a swamp. God led them b'charava, like in a dry, b'charava b'toch hayam, in a dry land inside the water.
Yeah, that's what a swamp is. A
No,
swamp
but
is...
b'charava means it's dry.
Yeah, but it's not...
muddy.
Yeah, no, it is muddy. It's not deep with water, but it's a marsh. Here in California we have a thing called tide pools, right? The tide goes out and you can walk around on the beach. It's gooey and there are bugs and stuff, but the idea is that it wasn't that reading, which is the naturalist reading, talks about it as being a marsh, as being it's an easy. It's just not as much fun as the other story, massive sea being open. Okay? Now, that's level one. That's how the story is told. And everybody has to go, ooh. Okay? Right? Now, let's go level two. In order to know level two, you got to put a finger here and come back with me to the beginning. Page 3. Come back to page 3. Come back to page 3. Our storyteller is trying to say something more than just, wasn't it miraculous that we got liberated? Our storyteller is trying to give us has a different idea here. Ready? Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, or when God began to create heaven and earth. Page 4. Va'aretz hayta tohu vavohu. The world was mishmash. Tohu vavohu. V'choshech al pnei tehom. Darkness on the surface of Tehom, the deep. Tehom, in Babylonian life, is the name of a goddess. The goddess of waters. The darkness on the surface of the deep. Deep what? Deep water. Before there's anything, there is water. Water is the symbol of primordial chaos, mishmash, uncreated world. It's all water. Why is water the symbol of chaos? Ever have a roof leak? Anyone ever have a roof leak? And it's leaking here, and the roofer comes and tries to fix it, and it's still leaking here. And they say, well, the problem is that it's leaking here, but it's coming in over there, and it's finding its way. Do you ever have that? You ever put a glass of water in front of a small child on a high chair? Bam! All over the water goes where it wants. It doesn't pay attention to rules. It's kind of screwy, right? We can put a man on the moon, but they can't stop the drip in my kitchen. You know?
Follows the natural laws, not ours.
Well, but the point is that it's chaotic, right? Tehom, the goddess Tiamat in the Babylonian pantheon, was the goddess of the waters. And she was the goddess of violent creation. Because we're all born in water, too. You don't remember this, but... And yeah, water. You're born in water. Water's everywhere. Water is, and God is over the Tehom. V'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God or the wind of God. Does that sound a little familiar? The wind of God pushing back the waters of chaos to create a created world which is orderly, which has sense, which is somewhat predictable, which is orderly enough to have a life, to build a home and a family and a future, to have a future, to imagine a future. The Ruach of Elohim, the wind of God, the Spirit of God, it's the same word, Ruach, pushing back the chaos. There is a huge Middle Eastern mythology about the battle between the gods and the battle of the creation gods against the chaos gods. And our Bible doesn't have any of it except all these little hints. Yeah, we know you know those stories. We're going to tell you a different story. This God doesn't need to battle. This God controls it all. But he has to do something. He has to push it back. Pushing back the waters of chaos. Pushing back the waters of destruction in order to create a place of order and pushing back death in order to create a space in the world for life. So the first thing is, God says, let there be light, and there's light, and he calls and the light's good, and he calls it day and night, and there was evening and morning a first day. Turn the page. This is the part I want to get to. And God said, what's the second thing after light? God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters. Huh? Where's the water? But that's the point. The Bible's symbol for uncreated world is water. So he just created light. He hasn't even created a universe yet. But there's water. So what do we need to do if we're going to create an ordered universe? Create a space in the middle of the chaos. A space in the middle of the water. That's going to be our ordered world. A space for life in a world of death. A space of light in a world of darkness. Remember the famous blue marble picture from 1960, whatever, 68, 60? They took a picture of the Earth from outer space. And you see the vastness of space. And in the vastness of empty, dark space is this one little speck of blue-green life we call home. God says, give me a space in the midst of the water. There'll be water above. There'll be water below. And by the way, living in a world where there's an ocean above you and an ocean below you has got to be a little insecure. Like, you hope it don't fall. I mean, you're living with I used to have a neighbor that used to have a bad shower, and whenever my neighbor showered, I understood what God meant, with water above and water below, you know. The rakia is the space of ordered in nature. This is the creation of nature, the creation of an ordered nature. God made the expanse and it separated the water below from the water above, and God called that sky, and he called this earth, and then he said, let the water below the sky be gathered, so there'll be seas, so there's dry land. Does this sound familiar? This is the creation of the world, of the natural world. The creation of the natural world takes place how? You gather up the water, you put it in a space, and you create a space that's not water, where life can live, where order can predominate, a place which is predictable, a place which is not chaotic. That's the creation of nature. Now come back to our story. Come back to our story. What happens in our story? What happened in our story? What elements do you have in our story again? Water, wind, God, right? So what's happening in our story? This is the creation of history. If Genesis is the creation of nature, and nature has rules, natural laws, and we can live in nature because we come to understand its patterns, and we can live it because it's orderly. Look, nature is orderly, you know that, right? Nature follows. Gravity, you can depend upon it. Don't try to screw with it. Okay? Gravity does not make exceptions. Okay? It doesn't. There are rules to the world. You can live in this world because it's an ordered world. How about history? Does history have order also? Well, here's the story. We stood at the banks of the sea, and God's wind once again blew and pushed back the water. In this case, the water is what? The water is Pharaoh and his evil. And what does Pharaoh represent? Pharaoh represents a philosophy which is that might makes right, that power determines all. And in that world, where might makes right and power determines all, God intervenes and says, no, there's other things at work, and I'm going to push that evil back. I'm going to push that evil back, and I'm going to create a dry land for you to walk through. Ordered history. And who is walking through? This is what makes the story so unlikely. The storyteller knows this. Who is it? Who wins in the end? The slaves. The slaves beat the masters. The Israelites beat the Egyptians. We go free. In history, the great task of history is to make a dry land in the midst of the waters, to make a space of order, of meaning in the space of historical chaos, a space where justice prevails, where compassion prevails, where humanity, where decency prevails, not simply might, not simply power, which is nature's world. In nature, might makes right. You might be the most righteous, kind, gentle vegetarian there ever was. The tiger is going to eat you. Why? Because he's hungry and he's more powerful than you are. In nature, might makes right. In history, is it ever possible for justice to prevail? For compassion to prevail? For humanity to prevail? For love to prevail? That's the question this storyteller is asking us. Can we create a way through the waters that makes sense? And sometimes it happens. And that's why the story is so glorious. Right? Sometimes it happens. Right? Sometimes the Berlin Wall falls and you say, you know, maybe freedom can win over oppression. Sometimes a civil rights law gets passed and you say, maybe justice and equality can win over hatred and prejudice. Right? Sometimes it wins. And when it wins, you sing a song. Because it is so unexpected and remarkable that through the chaos of history comes a moment where justice prevails. And our storyteller knows you know Genesis really well. And that's why you have all the same symbols. The water, the wind, the dry land, the rakia, the ordered place. And at the end, when we get to the other side, this most unlikely thing happens. Slaves aren't slaves anymore. They become men and women, free people. And we say, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, let God rule forever. Because that's the great task. Not done yet, but that's the great task. God gave us an ordered natural world. Can we create an ordered historical world? Can we create an ordered historical world where justice and compassion prevails? That's the question the storyteller asks us at the end of the story. You see how that works? All right, take a breath. That's a good sermon, I thought. I should have written that down. Damn, I didn't write it down. It'll be recorded. You might hear that more than once. All right, who's got a question? Any questions, comments, counter sermons? Yes. Wait, hang on. We're going to give you the microphone so you'll be immortal.
Just a simple question.
No, there's no simple question. This is good
I
stuff.
don't really hardly read Hebrew.
No.
In Bereshit, it's Elohim.
Yeah.
Is it Adonai in this?
Yeah, it's
or-
both. It's all over the
In
place.
both chapters, they go between Elohim and Adonai?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you want to separate them, that's what biblical scholars would do and separate them, and they would use that as a tool to separate the strands of narrative. But for a moment, I'm asking you to read them together, because I think the storyteller took all these strands of narrative and wants us to hear the story as a unified story.
I just wondered if Elohim, the many in Bereshit, went to Adonai, a more consolidated God, maybe, through that journey. But that's what I was asking. Like, did the notion of God go from more of a many to a one over the course of this?
It's not the many and the one. It's the God Elohim is the God of nature. That's the God that creates cosmos. That's the God of an ordered nature. But that God is amoral. That God is might makes right. Right? Adonai is the God of transformation. And if you follow the narrative of Adonai, that's the God who says, I'm releasing slaves because they belong to me. I'm destroying Pharaoh because he's evil. And it's the question of, can human morality overcome the natural world's amorality? That's the question of Adonai Elohim. And the belief in Adonai is a belief that vision of a world of justice is just as real as the natural reality around us. That moral law is every bit as real as natural law. That there are moral laws that govern the universe with the same power that gravity governs the universe, that inertia governs everything that Newton described. There are moral laws just that real, That's the faith of the Bible. That's what it means to believe in God. It's to believe that there are moral laws that govern this, but you see, they're not. You can't count on them. I mean, what if the sea hadn't opened? We'd have been slaughtered by this side. It would have been a very short book. The Jews complained, and everything they complained about happened. Plunk. No, but seriously, I mean, I'm making fun, which I shouldn't. But the story is told because this is the birth of Jewish faith. This is the birth of Jewish faith. The birth of Jewish faith is if you believe and you're willing to fight. I mean, the Midrash adds you're willing to fight and you're willing to make steps. You can bring to bear a moral law on the universe that is every bit as powerful as natural law. That is what is being said here. This is the birth of Jewish faith. And I can prove it to you, because in a couple of chapters, God's going to introduce himself to us. On Mount Sinai, remember? We were all there. You were all there. You stood next to me on my foot. It was hard to hear. And God came down the mountain and said, Ani Adonai Elohecha, I am the Lord your God. What next? Creator of heaven and earth? Nope. Creator of life and death? Nope. All powerful? Nope. What did God say? I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Why do you know God from that experience and not from nature? Because the God of nature doesn't care if you live or die. Well, he does, but it's, the God of nature is amoral. But the God of history wants you, and that's where you get don't murder and don't commit adultery and don't steal and don't lie and that's where you get moral law from. You get it from this, because you can create with me, says God, a moral universe. I need your help to create a moral universe through the chaos of the world. And if you give up, I'm not yelling at you because of all people, you're the last person I should yell at. You and your family. And her father's a great hero of American history. So if you give up, guess what? The water comes back. And the water drowns us all. And the amorality of chaos, might makes right, becomes the law. The law of the jungle becomes the law of the world.
So you spend all the time holding back the water.
That's what you do. You spend all your time holding back the water. Right. That's exactly what you do, holding back the water and bailing us out, bucket at a time. Right? Someone over here. Hi.
Hi, this birth of faith
Yes.
is born out of fear, not out of love.
Well, that's a great question. You think so? The birth of faith is born out of fear, not out of love. Yes and no. I mean, certainly it is a moment of enormous fear, and then it transitions to a moment of enormous redemption, right? By being rescued, right? But the idea that you were a slave yesterday and you're free tomorrow. Suddenly you have it tomorrow. Slaves have no tomorrows. The one feature of being a slave is that every tomorrow is just like every yesterday. Slaves have no tomorrows. That's why slaves don't rebel. It doesn't take very much, by the way, to keep slaves.
But what I meant was that they had to watch the Egyptians drown.
Yeah.
And that's where the fear of God is born.
Yeah.
As opposed to loving God. They could have loved God for saving them. That could have been sufficient.
Well, so that's a wonderful point. So there is a midrash. What the midrash does, midrash is the rabbi's reading of this, and when the rabbis have those deep moral questions like this one, you find it in the midrash. So there's a midrash which literally adds another layer to the story. So here's the midrash. You know this midrash, famous midrash. When Pharaoh and his guys are drowning in the sea, right, and the people of Israel begin to sing, the angels in heaven begin to sing. Right? How glorious is God, he destroyed the evil Pharaoh. And God comes along in the midrash and says, Shah, my children are drowning in the sea. You don't celebrate. Now, think about that. On earth, we sing. And God don't mind that we sing because we're people, and people do this. Right? But in heaven, you expect something more. And the midrash gives us that higher morality, which is you shouldn't have to, redemption shouldn't be bought at the cost of somebody else's suffering. Redemption doesn't need to, we're better than this. Right? We're better than this. So what do you do when you recite the 10 plagues? Anyone been to a Seder? What do you do at the 10 plagues? Why do you pour out the wine? You're diminishing your joy because people suffered. I mean, and you're doing it silently, by the way, because out loud you're doing the people's job. You're singing the song. Isn't it great? Those bastards suffered. Dam Sfardea. But quietly, without a word, you're dipping out wine because you're saying, we're better than we don't celebrate. We celebrate. We're free. You don't have to and we got redeemed. You don't have to celebrate the suffering of Egyptians, right? There's another custom. Anyone here a firstborn? The day before Pesach, all the firstborn fast. Why do firstborn fast? The other way around. Out of solidarity to those who did die. Because out of a sense of sorrow that the firstborn of Egypt had to die in order for us to be reborn as free people. So there is a layer of that sensitivity. But on the other hand, it's really hard for a subjugated people to feel much sensitivity for those who have oppressed them. Right? It's really very hard to do that. It's hard to feel sorry for Nazis. Right? No, I'm serious. It's hard for subjugated people that seen brutality to feel sorry for pretty much anybody, actually, but especially for those who have been involved in their brutality. right? And that's a human response, which is, I think, why the Midrash is written the way it is, why it allows the Israelites to sing the song, but God castigates the angels, not the Israelites. Yeah, I know, and I want to do one more layer of the story. So where are we? Hi, Vlad. How are you?
Good.
If you sit there, my neck gets sore.
Sorry.
I love you, my friend, but next time move the hell over.
I had to get here earlier.
I know. Well, that's okay.
So no, my response to the question, I think, is that there's a saying that there are no atheists in foxholes.
Yeah.
And most of the time, people who experience fear,
Yeah.
that's when they find faith. That's when they realize they reach a point of crisis and they're pulled out.
This raises the question I want to get to. This is the third level. So let's ask your question. Third level of the story. So we've read the story the way it just as a story, and we read it from the participant's point of view. Then we read the story again from the storyteller's point of view. Now I want to read it from the redactor. Redactor means editor. The person who put this into the Bible. What did they tell us? They told us a whole different story. Watch. Let's go back to the beginning of the Parsha. Come back to the beginning of the Parsha. Page 399. Vayehi Beshalach Paro et ha'am. When Pharaoh let the people go. Doesn't even let them go. Beshalach means to send them. God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, even though there were no Philistines at the moment, but that would have been the land of the Philistines. Although it was nearer, for God said to whom? To himself. The people may have a change of heart when they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people round about by way of the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds. We could have gotten home a hell of a lot quicker. There was a shortcut. It would have taken us like 2 weeks. We would have been in Canaan. No Red Sea. No Amalekites, just home. Instead, he took us the long way. Why did he take us the long way? Was it safer? No, much more dangerous. Why did he take us the long way? Because God was sensitive to what? To what? To who we were, to who we are. The redactor, the editor of the story, is going to ask the question, not how did history get born? That's the storyteller's question. Not how did we get redeemed? That's the story itself. But how did this change us? Because the redactor is exquisitely sensitive to this. The process of getting Israel out of Egypt is easy compared to getting Egypt out of Israel. That's much harder. So what happens? We have our story. We have the incredible contrast between the sarcastic, bitter, cynical, kvetch. Did you take us out of Egypt because there weren't enough graves in Egypt so we could die out here? Isn't that what we told you when we said, leave us be and we'll serve the Egyptians? Wouldn't it have been better if we'd have stayed in Egypt? The contrast between that, the glory of the event, and that remarkable line at the end on page 405, which is the climax of the story, which should have been the end of the movie. Vayar Israel et Yad Hagdolah. Israel saw the powerful hand of God, Asher Asa Adonai b'Mitzrayim, all that God had done in Egypt. V'yiruam et Adonai, they revered God, they feared God. V'yaminu b'Adonai. Can I get an amen? Amen. You guys are pathetic. They believed, v'yaminu. V'yaminu, but this cynical, bitter, kvetching, skeptical, doubting people, finally, 10 plagues leaving Egypt, watching the sea split, finally, vayaminu b'Adonai ubu Moshe avdo, they believe. Can I get a hallelujah? Hallelujah. They believe. They have accepted God in their hearts because, I'll be right with you, Arnie. After all, what is this? The sea splitting and you going through is a birthing image. We have been born again. Amen, brothers and sisters. Born again in faith. Born again in God. Born again in righteousness. Can I get an amen? Amen. Except it ain't true. Because you're Jews. And the redactor says, that's what you think? That's what you think it takes to create a trusting people? You think people change that fast? You think people are ready to become... You think one apocalyptic moment turns the heart of a people? Is that what you think? Is that how you think you redeem the world? Oh, my boy, turn the page. Turn the page. Turn the page. Turn the page. No, hang on. Don't give me one thing. I'm on a roll here, Dad. Let me get this out because I'll forget what I wanted to say. Right? So what happens? What happens? What happens? My God. Page 412, please. Then Moses caused Israel to set out from the Sea of Reeds. You see, movies, I like movies because they have these glorious endings, right? The Death Star explodes. Luke Skywalker receives the award, right? Han Solo gets the princess. Credits roll. Not so in life. Life don't work that way. I don't know if you know this, but in life, there's something that we call the morning after. They went into the wilderness of Shur. Yeah, Shur. Yeah, page 413. They traveled how long? 3 days. Look, come on. This is like Gilligan's Island, right? 3 days. 1, 2, 3. 3 days. They came to Mara. They couldn't drink the water. They grumbled. What's there to drink? So he figured it out, right? Then he says to them, just obey God. Everything will be fine. Obey God. Everything will be fine. Turn to page 414, right? They set out a little farther on the 15th day of the 2nd month. So we're out 6 weeks in the wilderness. Verse 2. The whole Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. They said, once again, when you people kvetch, you become articulate. Soliloquy, Shakespearean. If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt, where we sat by the flesh pots and had our fill of bread. Flesh pot. It's the midnight buffet with the chocolate fountain and the ice sculptures and the canopies. I'm telling you, don't you remember back in Egypt, the midnight buffet every night? Don't you remember? Don't you remember if you had brought us into the wilderness to starve us to death? Wait, I thought Vayaminu Badonai b'moshavto. I thought they believed. You go 3 days in the desert, and what are they doing already? They're kvetching. There's not enough water. There's not enough food. The internet connection's lousy. You can't get HBO out here. Yeah. Kvetch. Wait a minute. What's going on, Arnie?
You said no one died. The Jews died. Well, we all did die in 40 years.
Well, that's coming.
None of the people who came out of Egypt, apart from...
Yeah, we're about to get to that.
Okay. So we did die.
Come back in 3 months. Well, we did die, but you see, what you're going to get to in a... Hold on, just 1 minute. We'll come to that point, right? So what happens, right? So Moses says, we're on page 415, right? 415. They grumbled against Moses. And the Lord said to Moses, 414, I will rain down bread from the sky. You want to see a miracle? Watch this. Rain bread from the sky, and the people should go and gather it, right? So tell them they can get it every day. On the 6th day, take 2, and on the 7th day, don't take any. Right? And Moses says, by evening you'll know it's God who took us out, because he's heard your grumbling. Right? You want food? We give you food. Turn to 4:16. Right? In the evening there was quail, verse 13. In the morning there was dew, After the dew lifted at the surface of the wilderness lay a fine flaky substance as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, in Hebrew it's manhu, which means, what is this stuff? And so they called it, what is this stuff? The word manna literally means, what is this stuff? There's a chocolate bar called a whatchamacallit bar. Is that right? That's what manna, the word manna means, what is this stuff? Moses said to them, this is the bread God has given you to eat. This is what God commanded. Gather as much as you want. An omer a person. Right? Take as much as you need. Let me get that again. Take as much as you need, not as much as you want. Take as much as like going to Target. Costco. Anyone ever gone to Costco and come back with something and ask yourself, wait a minute, did I need this? Right? My father once brought back a box car of toilet paper. Right? He called us. He said, you need toilet paper? I said, sure. Is it 100,000 rolls? You know. Have you ever gone to Costco? I mean, Costco is like this. I mean, this is Costco, right? You can take as much as you need, but don't take as much as you want. That's an interesting lesson in life, right? And they did so. They gathered. And when they measured it by the omer, he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little had no deficiency. But this is God's Costco. When you get to the checkout, you only take home what you need. No matter what you put in the cart, you're only going to take home what you need. Whoa. You're not impressed with that. I'm so impressed with that. I think this is great. If God ran Costco, this is how it would work. Godco. And Moses said, don't leave any of it over to morning. But they didn't pay attention. Now what is, he said, like, only take so much, but they all took a lot more. And then he said, don't leave it over in the morning, but they left it over in the morning. What's their problem? They're afraid. These are slaves. They're afraid. What if there's not enough? What if it disappears? What if I need a snack? There's a fear, and he's beginning to understand, and God's beginning to understand his people, right? So they gathered it every morning, right? Each as much as he needed. And on the sixth day, they gathered double. That's kind of cool. That's why I have 2 challahs on the table, 2 omers. And he said, tomorrow's a day of rest, a holy Shabbos. Bake what you would bake, boil what you would boil, and what is left, put aside, it'll keep till morning. So the only time it kept is on Friday night. So that Shabbos morning, when you got up, there was manna ready. You didn't have to go get any, right? So they put it aside until morning as Moses ordered, and it didn't turn foul. There were no maggots. And Moses said, eat today for today's Shabbos. Now what do you have? A person who works 7 days a week and you suddenly give him a Shabbos, what happens to him? What does he do? He goes to work. Why does he go to work if he doesn't have to go to work? Because that's
Force of habit.
It's either force of habit or because that's what he is, that's what defines him, or he's afraid. You see the picture? You have a person who's an obsessive worker, and you give him a moment of leisure, and he can't take it. You're beginning to see who this people is, right? Moses says, eat today, it's a Sabbath. Look at verse 27 on page 418. Ready? 16. It's chapter 16, verse 27. Some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather. Why did they go out on the 7th day to gather? That's what they do. They were afraid. They're afraid there wouldn't be enough. They're afraid they wouldn't have enough. They're afraid they'd starve. They're afraid they'd be burned. There's a grasp. You feel the grasping? And Moses and the Lord, and so God told, I'll give you as much as you want. Why do you got to do that? Now listen to the question. This is such a great question. And the Lord said to Moses, Ad ana me'antem lishmor mitzvotai v'torati. Toratai. How long? Ad ana means how long? Up until when? How far will you people refuse to obey my teachings and commandments? Now that's a really strange question, isn't it? I mean, is God in a hurry? Ad ana. It doesn't say, why don't you obey me? It says, how long are you going to keep doing this? How long is it going to take? How long before you trust that there's enough for you? How long before you understand that you're free? How long do you unchain yourself from the slavery within, from your fear, from your anxiety, from your worry that there isn't enough. How long is it going to take? How long has it been? It's only been 6 weeks. How long is it going to take? And what am I going to have to do to convince you? You wanted to be free? I brought 10 plagues on Pharaoh. You wanted to be free? I split the Red Sea. You were hungry? I gave you bread from the sky. You don't have to work for it. All I ask you is just gather what you need and don't gather any Shabbos. What do you people do? You gather more than you need and you hoard it? You hoard it? And then Shabbos you go out looking for it? The hell's wrong with you people? You feel something in God here? What do you feel in God? Exasperation, frustration. But it's a weird question because ad ana, it's not matai or it's not madua. It doesn't, why are you like this? It's ad ana. Is God in a hurry? So okay, God, it'll take 40 years. It'll take 400 years. It'll take 4,000 years. What do you care? You're God. But that's not God's question. Whose question is that? Well, whose question is the editor giving us here? It's our question. How long is it going to take? How long before you realize what your responsibilities are in the world? How long do you get to be a free? When do you get to be free? When will you finally accept your the promise of freedom and stop doing this to each other? You hear, there's the frustration of the idealist. So, we saw the participants' view of the story. We saw the storyteller's view of the story, which is the birth of history. What's the redactor's vision of the story? This bitter, powerful, unbelievable contrast between the apocalyptic miracle of redemption. The sea split, we were free. Vayaminu b'Adonai b'Moshe avdo. On the one hand, and human fear reasserting itself just a few hours later.
Neurosis.
No, it's not neurosis. No, it's not neurosis. It's not neurosis. It's not neurosis. It's you got to understand people. The redactor is trying to say to you, you can't think of a bigger miracle than what we went through, and still it didn't change you. If I'm going to change you, I'm going to have to find a different way to do it. People are going to need... Wait, Bill, wait. It's going to take a different way to change you. A different way to change you. And the frustration of the idealist who just wants to see the world changed has to know that it is a long and bitter path to change people. It don't happen overnight, literally. There is no miracle, no apocalyptic moment so powerful that it releases human heart from its chains. Right? The first line of Rousseau, man is born free and everywhere is in chains, of Marx and of Rousseau. All of the great social philosophers of liberation had this idea that we could unchain the human heart. Bible says, yeah, I want to unchain the human heart. It ain't easy. And the contrast between a God who can manipulate natural realities like that, one blow and the sea splits. When it comes to natural realities, God is all-powerful, completely omnipotent. You want frogs? I got frogs. You want locusts? Wow, locusts. You want darkness? I got darkness. I can do anything in the natural world because the natural world does what I tell it to do. But people, when it comes to changing people, that same omnipotent God, when are they going to change? He says to Moses. What's it going to take? What's it going to take? He's so powerful when it comes to moving seas and mountains, and so frustrated when it comes to moving people. That sound familiar? The storyteller says, this is the birth of history. The redactor says, yeah, but history ain't what you think it is. It's not these moments of redemptive, these miraculous redemption moments. It's a long, bitter road from slavery to freedom. That's what history is really all about. Now, can we make it? That's going to be the question. Arnie knows something about the end because there's more frustration ahead. Can we make it? That's going to be the question. All right, we got a couple of questions and comments, Bill, over here, and then we're going to go and daven and have enchiladas as the Lord God has commanded us.
It seems to me throughout this.
Yeah.
There's another dimension that's not really dwelt upon.
Yeah.
And that is the choice of Moses, who was raised in Pharaoh's palace, is pretty familiar with the kind of lifestyle that a Pharaoh would enjoy, and he is chosen to lead our people who are slaves.
Yeah.
So there's that added backstage dimension.
Oh, I think it's a wonderful observation, and I'm gonna ask you to come back in a book and a half, because I'll tell you why. Because Exodus is really about the people, and Leviticus is about institutions. But when we get to the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, the fourth book of the Torah, that's where we get a glimpse into the heart of Moses. And you begin to understand this man. Who is this man, Moses? What drives him? Where is his strength? Right? And you begin to wonder, what does it take to be a Moses? What does it take to be a leader? Right? And what are his shortcomings? What are the shortcomings of this powerful, magnificent creature? And that's what the book of Numbers really. Numbers is really a spiritual biography of Moses. And bad things are going to happen to him, and he's going to grow. And he's going to grow. So I'll give you the miracle of Moses, as long as you mention it. When God calls him at the burning bush a couple of weeks ago, he says to God, Lo ish devarim anochi. I'm not a person of words. Which we could say is a speech impediment, but I think it's much deeper than that. I'm not a person who has anything to say to the world. I gave that up. I don't want to be a leader. I want to be a shepherd. Sheep are much easier than Jews. I don't know if you know this, right? I don't have anything to say. I'm a private man. Leave me alone. Right? I'm not a man of any words. I've not concluded anything about my life. I have no truth. And then at the end of the Torah, we're going to open the last book of the Torah, and the first line of the last book of the Torah is, right? Elah hadvarim asher diber Moshe al kol bnei Yisrael. These are the words, the devarim that Moshe speaks. In the course of the 40 years in the desert, he finds words. Something happens to a human being like that gives him something to say to the world, something to say, a truth that he now stands on. And the question is going to be, how does he find that truth? And how do we? How do you find truth in your life? So we're coming. Okay, you got to stick with us there. Okay, someone's got the mic?
Oh, sorry.
Brian. Huh?
So you were comparing this part of Exodus to the creation story with the water and all that stuff.
I think the storyteller does that because I think the linguistic connections can't be coincidental.
Well, it also reminds me of the two versions of Adam. Right?
Yeah.
The two Adams, and this is that's reflected in the Israelis where they see all these miracles and yet they can't let go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the question of God's frustration in this is really a theme that runs through much of the Torah. And the question is, whose frustration is that? And I suggest to you that it's the idealist. It's all of those who see the world and want it better and keep asking God's questions. Ad ana, what's it going to take? Right? What's it going to take? What's it going to take? All right, have a great Shabbos, everyone. Stay well. Come back Wednesday to study Zionism. What's it going to take? I got to go to work. All right, man. You take care. All right. Take care of yourself. Yes. Take care. You're important.